everybody, you guys have this story, we have our stories, like everybody really does feel ownership about Sesame Street because it's been around for 50 years. I mean, it's really part of our global culture. To be able to take that information, you know, about the inclusion, about their intention, and then go back and sort of like incept it into the back of your mind when you were a kid, then all of a sudden you start seeing the show differently, and you start seeing the setup differently and the impact differently because you're looking at it through your own lens.
Well, it's also connector, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the message connects us because the experience connects us.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. We're your hosts, Adam Krutinger
and Cameron Garrity.
And today on the show, we have Trevor Crafts and Ellen Scherer Crafts. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for being here. For anybody who doesn't know, Trevor and Ellen are the producers of the wonderful new film Street Gang, How We Got to Sesame Street. It's already in theaters and coming to a video on demand near you this Friday. We are so excited to have them here. Trevor and Ellen, welcome to Puppeteers.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, well, you know, we usually start with what are you up to now, but we know exactly what you're up to now.
It was premiere week. We were deep in it. We were watching everything.
That's right. You had another premiere back in February too, wasn't it? Or a screening of some sort?
We actually were in Sundance in January.
That's what it was.
Yeah, so we were so lucky.
Little film festival.
Yeah, I've heard of it before.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's known a little bit, yeah. But yeah, we were super excited. We were super excited to be invited to be part of Sundance, and it got an amazing response, which was also super exciting because we were all watching it from our living room on our computer screens. So it was nice to see people's reactions online and in the forums.
Yeah, well, and I checked back some old email into my Indiegogo, and I was like, when did I first back this thing? And it's been like, you know, I think 5 years or so.
1865.
Yeah.
1865 is when you first backed it.
Mr. Hooper was still alive, and no,
that's correct.
No, but because obviously you were working on that before, you know, anyone even knew about it from a kickstarting point of view. How long have you been working on this movie?
Officially, really since 2015 is when we got the rights from Michael Davis, the author of Street Gang: The Complete History of Sesame Street. So we've been pounding away, labor of love for 6 years now. So we use our daughter as the marker since she was born in 2015. So, you know.
Yes, I know. I just recently did a retrospective of photos of her and in our key moments in Sesame year, and it definitely tells a story. The road to independent filmmaking is long.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, and to say nothing of documentary independent filmmaking, especially.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But it must be. What's it like to just see the fan and critical reaction that the film is getting? Because you know, just that, you know, a project can be on someone's radar is exciting. I mean, we know from doing little things like this, and you know, you had a movie at Sundance.
Yeah, it's been overwhelming. It's been so wonderful, and we're so excited to, you know, we've had it so close for so long because we've been working on it for so long, and to get that initial response when we were at Sundance, that first of all, putting it out into the world was scary and exciting at the same time. And then you're waiting in your living room or, you know, just to see what people's reactions are, because you're not even in a theater to hear, you know, the audience response. But we're incredibly grateful for the response. And it has been amazing and big. And
because you start off with like an idea, and it's something that you know is, you know, I gave this book to Ellen and I said, you have to read this because this, you know, we were looking for a project that would be something that was a big story, but also something that was very personal to us. And I grew up as a Sesame Street kid, and I watched it with my folks, and we all watched it together. And you know, I loved Guy Smiley, and I loved all the characters, and it was just it was so much fun. And you know, as we were looking for something, here's this book that tells a story that so many pieces that I thought I knew, I really had absolutely no clue of the real story behind it. And you know, it's like Sesame Street's an institution, right? I mean, you guys have had tons of puppeteers on the podcast that, that are, doing the real work. And it didn't always start that way, though. I liken it to like oxygen. Like Sesame Street's always around, air's always around. Like we can breathe air. It's easy. I can watch Sesame Street anywhere I want, anytime I want. But it wasn't always that way. And to start an idea like that and then bring it all the way through all the different lines to finally get to having people see it, it's something that not a lot of people get to experience, which we feel, like Ellen said, incredibly grateful. But also I think it's just like, you have an idea that comes to reality and you go through all the stops and the starts and you're in an echo chamber for so long. And then you're finally hearing other people. It's not your own voice anymore. It's other people saying, this is good, and we really loved it.
And thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a long time.
Yeah.
To be working on something people didn't like.
It's like,
boy.
That one's stinky. We don't like it.
Wow, no, that's great. Were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that's such an interesting way to think about it, right? Because in a way, that could be a good motivation going either way, right? If you find something someone doesn't like and try to make them like it, right? Because I remember that there's another documentary I saw relatively recently. Have you seen it? What's the Rocka something band? The Rockafire Explosion. But it's a great documentary. Something I knew nothing about.
The director
so it's
especially
made you to know something about it. And whereas I could see people, probably not people like in our industry specifically, they're going to love this too. But like, what was there something about the way you were trying to film this and put this together to try to hook a general audience into letting them know that there's going to be information here that they probably don't know and would be interested to them?
Mm.
Yeah, it's such a great question, Adam, and you're right. That's exactly, because that's what I was drawn to in reading the book as well. It was this idea that it started from these very rebellious and revolutionary ideas, that first of all, nothing like it existed before, and this group of amazing individuals came together at the right time with a shared social consciousness. And they wanted to use this new medium of television to teach all young children going to school and in school at that time, using Madison Avenue techniques, right? Because kids were singing beer commercials. But more intentionally, I think is the right way to say it, that they wanted to ensure that children of color living in the inner city were going to get the same access, and that they were going to be supported in a way that spoke specifically to them. Mm-hmm. And that when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, like it's critical, and it's so critical to tell that story so that people understand where the show began and what the intentions were, right? And we didn't think a lot of people knew that. I mean, obviously a lot of people read Michael's book. It was a New York Times bestseller. But, to be able to take that as a origin story was what our intent was. And we thought that idea of a group of individuals coming together really as one unit to do something amazing for our world through creativity and was something that could speak to us universally as humans. And we thought that would be what we want people to take away from the film.
Yeah, and we've all had a Sesame experience, and that's also part of its universality, is that you see yourself in this narrative, because we all own a piece of Sesame. I think that's a funny thing that we sort of realized as we talked to a lot of different people about the film, even just casually, like, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on a documentary about Sesame Street. I remember when I was 7 and I saw this sketch of saxophones being made and I loved it. Everybody, you guys have this story. We have our stories. Like, everybody really does feel ownership about Sesame Street, because it's been around for 50 years. I mean, it's really part of our global culture.
It's like people talking about their trip to Walt Disney World or something. It's as personal as that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It is just like that. Or, when did you get your pandemic shot? I mean, it's like, it's the same global connected conversation, but to be able to take that information, about the inclusion, about their intention, and then go back and sort of like incept it into the back of your mind when you were a kid, then all of a sudden you start seeing the show differently, and you start seeing the setup differently and the impact differently because you're looking at it through your own lens.
Well, it's also connector, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the message connects us because the experience connects us. And so I think, again, that was just I mean, my gosh, the book is amazing and long and tells so much.
Yeah.
And we wanted to take the essence of it. And again, what is that one idea that we could come to tell this film? And we know, which was the whole idea of how it all started.
Yeah.
You know, and we've gotten a lot of people that are like, you know, you should have done more.
Why wasn't it a series? Why wasn't it a 15 and a half hour series? Well,
and you should have seen our rough cut because it was 2.5 hours
we
long.
Would like to. We'd like to. Send it our way.
Yeah, no, the rough cut was rough though, so I don't know if we would ever share that. But no, but it's just, again, it's such a big thing, and in order to make it into a message that was about this idea of creativity inspiring, you know, using creativity for inspiration to change the world. We just love that idea.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we try to center on in the film.
Totally. I'm a big Sorkin fan. And so there's a moment in The West Wing, I think it's President Bartlett, who says, you know, he recites the first words of the Declaration of Independence. And he says, you know, funny enough, all men are created equal. That was the first time anyone bothered to write that down. And to think of the early days of Sesame when, you know, Joan Cooney is talking to Lloyd Morissette, and she says, you know, do you think television could be used, or he said to her, do you think television could be used to teach? I was like, that's the first time anyone thought of asking that. Or if not,
it's
at least the first time anyone sought to answer the question. And it's just, you get goosebumps thinking about it all.
And it's so funny because, you know, quick aside.
Yeah.
In our film, we have some absolutely fantastic photos from a photographer named David Addy. And his son Eli, who we were working with on another project, was a writer on The West Wing.
Oh, no kidding!
One of the head writers on The West Wing.
I was going to say, okay, that I could recognize that name. You're working on this. You're working on the photo book as well, right?
The photo book. That's right. Yeah, which comes out at the end of the year with Abrams. But and that's a photo book of all of Eli's dad, David Addy's amazing work.
Oh my gosh, where do you guys see these photos?
You're gonna. Some of the greatest photos I will say this, and then I'll comment on Joan, but these are some of the greatest photos I've ever seen of Jim Henson. Period. No, full stop. And I'm a Jim Henson, you know, he's my guy. So as I'm sure.
But we digress.
Well, anyway, that's really refreshing to hear, and that's one thing that I loved so much about your documentary too, because I've seen so many Henson documentaries, Sesame Street, Muppets, and things like that, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see how much like things I hadn't really seen before, and I felt like I've seen a lot, and it was very, very refreshing to not see some of that same old footage. And the same goes for a lot of these photos too. They use the same photos over and over. It was very refreshing.
Well, thank you. And hearing that from you guys means a lot because I know that you do see a lot of this, and so we very much appreciate that. And you know, we have an amazing, had an amazing archival producer on the film, Rich Remsburg, who just uncovered gold, you know, in interviews from, you know, just news interviews that had this amazing coverage of when the show started, this amazing footage in Mississippi. You know, no spoilers, but you know, people who watch the film, you'll see a very important section in the film around the show airing in Mississippi, and then this just things like this interview with Joe Raposo that we have in the film. You know, there's a lot. I mean, you have to remember Sesame's a nonprofit, you know, and so they there's a lot of things and they were a workshop, truly creating things in the beginning that, you know, just were ephemeral in terms of who did it come from or where is it? And, you know, they're doing an amazing job now of getting all of that together. And we like to think that we helped a little bit with that process in doing this film. But Rich really went and found some deep stuff that, you know, many people hadn't seen, not only you guys, but even folks at the workshop hadn't seen in 50 years.
And that's saying something.
And that was
when you're subject, you're like bringing stuff bubbling up that they've never seen before, you know, and you're like, ooh, this is cool. This is good.
And that was part of the fun in the beginning too, you know, talking to the original cast and crew, you know, and people saying, I think there might be a box in this person's basement. You know, if you want to go and like, look at that. And we're like, sure.
When we talk, we had a whole long bit with Fran Brill, who is fantastic. We love Fran. She is the absolute gem. And there was a whole line there of like, well, have you talked to this person and this box? And let me check. I'll check for the tapes.
Yeah.
And then that's actually where we ended up getting at the end of our film in the credit sequence. We have this great Put Down the Ducky.
Yeah.
Whole sort of full cast, full crew ensemble song, which I think is the first time it's ever been seen. And that all came from a line from Fran telling us about a tape, which then squiggled over here, and then we went over there, and it's like that all got us to the right spot. But it's this great collective wisdom.
And we say it was an embarrassment of riches. We
Yeah.
actually had so much, and I know for the people listening to this, you will truly appreciate when you get told we're at Kaufman Studios, where they're currently filming the show. And they said, you can look in this closet. Like we're literally pulling out boxes.
Like open the closet, it like falls on you, and you're like swimming in it like Scrooge McDuck. It's like, I'll take all of it.
But my favorite moment was pulling out these photos, and it was Roscoe Orman trying on different hair.
Different wigs.
So I literally have like headshots of him with it was amazing. Pictures of Sonia and Luis's wedding. Like I'm in heaven right now just looking at all this stuff. We were very, very fortunate that everybody really trusted us with this amazingly precious material and gave it to us to take a look at. And we feel incredibly lucky and honored that they trusted us with it, and hope that they're happy with what we did with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, can you talk a little bit about how you did get that access? Because I would imagine you had to do some kind of proving of yourselves certainly before Michael gave you the rights to the book, or the publishers, whoever, and then it's a whole other thing to get the workshop's buy-in. How did you guys make that happen?
There's like a whole blindfolded ritual that then you have to put on like the puppet rods, and I don't even want to talk about where they go, and it's just all bad. No. It's I think it's a lot of it honestly is about it's about intent. Ellen talked about intent of the Sesame original gang that created the show. And for us, I think we had a very similar intentionality in creating our documentary. I had an early conversation with Jeff Dunn, who was then the CEO of Sesame Workshop, and the executive team, and I was really specific. I said, we're not trying to ruin anybody's childhood. This is a story that we've forgotten about. We forgot that there was a time when we didn't have Sesame Street. And we want to be an independent voice to remind people that creativity wins. And this is
and it's so critically important. Art, creativity, art for children. This is incredibly important, and it pays dividends for us as a society.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we honor it and that we recognize that it's extremely precious and that you can't take it for granted.
And there was a lot of trust that had to be earned. I mean, this is the longest running kids television show in history, and it is, I think, probably by now, I think it's like the top 10 longest running television shows, period. And if it's not, it's like 11 or 12. And that's a lot of weight to carry, because you want to make sure that you're not doing something that is going to, put a black mark on something that has been so revered, and rightfully so, for so long. And so it took time, and it took conversations, and it took a lot of talking.
And the process really started with Michael.
Yeah.
I mean, we reached out to him because, he wrote this amazing book, and trying to find him was hard. We actually couldn't find him.
He went off the grid. I was like, great, I'll just call my entertainment attorney, who happens to represent, the parent company of Penguin, and this will done. 5 minutes. Give me 10 minutes tops. I think like 2 months later, I was still looking for a way to get in contact with Michael, because he wasn't with his agent anymore, and Penguin didn't have, I don't know.
It fell into an abyss. Like, it was just couldn't find him.
And it was actually a good friend of mine who was part of the inspiration for doing the doc, Stephen Christie, who he's the president of development at Boom Studios, the comic book company. And we'd done some other work with him on some other projects. And he said, give me a minute. I think I can get his number. And I'm like, you're not going to get his number, because I can't get his number, and I've exhausted the internet. I broke the internet trying to find his number. And turns out Stephen is incredibly good friends with Brian J. Jones, who wrote the Henson biography. And 2 minutes later, I had Michael's phone number. It's like, great. I wish I'd come to you earlier because I could have saved a month there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, Michael tells the story, and he just told it recently, where he had a situation where people had come to him before for the rights and it didn't work out. And, and he and Deborah, his lovely wife, were sort of nervous around the Hollywood types, but Trevor and I really aren't Hollywood types. We were just, really. We have a small company and we always had a plan. We came together with a plan.
Clicked early.
We had an intention, and we just talked about what our intention was, and we all felt really comfortable, and we adore Michael, and we're very close now to, and he took a chance on us and because of Michael's relationships with the workshop and researching the book, the workshop found out about us, and then we got an invitation to talk, and to Jeff Dunn, who was the CEO at the time, and again, it was the same thing, really just saying, we'd love to have this opportunity, and they gave it to us. And that was really just incredibly, exciting and wonderful. And again, it was something that we didn't take lightly.
No,
sure.
And I think it's tricky for authors and for brands too. It's like, especially if you're not, even if you are working with a big studio, it was just announced not that long ago that Muppet Man is, going to be turned into a biopic, which is wonderful, by Disney. That's not the first time that carousel has gone around. These are hard. Movies are hard. It's hard to make these things, and to really be able to stick with us as the filmmakers through all of the ups and downs that happen. It takes a lot of patience, not only from us, which is a lot of patience and waiting, but also for the people that we're working with on the IP side, from the Muppet side and Sesame side and Michael's side. It's like, it just takes time.
A lot of communication.
And a lot of talking.
So what was it about Street Gangs, the book, that made you want to do this documentary? Because you could do an origin story of Sesame Street without needing Michael Davis's a book or potentially involved. Yeah, his involvement really at all. Although, of course, it's nice to use the same name, have it connected. I see reasons to do it, but what about it really pulled you to it?
Well, I think that the title of Michael's book is fantastic. I love that play on words. The Street Gang is so much fun. And beyond that, if you're going to make a movie, it's really, like we said, it's very challenging to put all the pieces together. To start from nothing is, you're digging your hole even deeper. And so it's always great to have the person that's on your team that already has all of the answers that you're looking for, even before you ask them. And has been that guy for us for a lot of things. We're very much on record, Michael will easily forget more than any of us will ever know, including you guys, about Sesame Street, because he's the man. In terms of information, he spent as much time as we spent on the film, he spent that same amount of time on deep research on his book.
And again, that's an important element, because this is a documentary, and we wanted this to be grounded in truth and in research. Mm-hmm. And, he spent an incredible amount of time on research on his book. And, that was another embarrassment of riches. He was so gracious enough to give us access to audio recordings and notes that he had taken, so that we could really examine that to create the narrative of the documentary. It's so hard to create a narrative to a documentary, because the archival is what really helps you tell the story. But we had a direction and we had a path that we wanted to go on, and we knew that the resources that he had was going to help us. But I think Trevor makes a really great point. Again, his book was called Street Gang. It's about the people. And that was, again, the focus that we wanted to have on the doc. Obviously, all of the amazing elements about the show that we all love, with Muppets and animation and music, are all incredibly important and shaped us and shaped the show. But we wanted really the focus to be on the people. And that was what the book was about. And so that's what really drew us in. Yeah, and that was the connection. It was a natural that made it a perfect fit.
And you know what, building on Adam's question, and I think that's a really great point, especially of not only the help that you get from Michael, but also just like a continuation of a brand of sorts.
Legacy.
But yeah. But I am curious, so what was the decision-making process then in making sure that it was still a film that stood on its own and not just feeling like, oh, they just turned the book into a movie? if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, were there things
And I
that
think-
you knew you wanted
No,
to add to the story or change or emphasize in a way that couldn't be done in his book or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I think part of it was Michael's book covers quite a lot more time, right, than our book. So Michael starts, where we start, also sort of pre Sesame, but then does a lot of backstory on each one of the characters, and doesn't have as much focus on the three main characters. And then also his goes all the way up to 2009, essentially, when the book was published. I think for us, how do you take all of that, and you can't condense all of that down into a 107-minute movie. So we knew we wanted to focus specifically, like Ellen said, on the origin story of Sesame. And part of it is that it is inspired by the book, and it is based on all of the elements of the book, but it's also based on the overall story of how the workshop came to be. And so it is, I think, its own unique animal, that it was always going to become something that both stood with and stood apart from the book itself, because we're not using the same interviews. It's not like he filmed the interviews and we're pulling those.
Yeah.
We did our, and time has passed, and everybody's got their own unique take in interviewing Sonia or Bob or Fran or Carol.
And again, in his book, he's interviewed so much more of the gang than we could cover in the film. And that was a very tough choice in doing this film. And we've we would have loved to have covered the same number of people, but we also had to come up with a way of highlighting as many people as we could in the gang. And if you look at the credits, you will see that we have thanked every single person that contributed to the show that we possibly could. And if we forgot anyone, I know someone will let us know, and we will make sure it's there, because we wanted to make sure that these incredible individuals were honored. But we had to make choiceful decisions around how we were going to have the gang, gang members that we highlighted in the film, be representative of the spirit of what each person, the pillar of what each person stood for, right? So when you have your Joan, you have your Lloyd and Joan as creators. Joan is the overseer, really, of the show, this incredible leader, and then you have John Stone, who's really sort of the heart, right? This heart of the show, and the person who visioned the street. He's not the only person who worked on that. We know there were many people that were there, but that's really helps the audience connect to this person who really didn't get a lot of modern recognition for this role that he had. And it was critically important. He was there for a very long time. You obviously have the creative genius of Jim Henson and what he brought to the street, and how he made these, what weren't then, but are now, iconic characters that are part of our American lexicon of media, right? And then you have music. Joe Raposo, this musical director who created the children's American songbook through Sesame Street music, and we know there were other incredible people there, that were making music, like Jeff Moss, for example.
All the J's, right?
Again,
just like Michael talked about.
All the J's.
It's the J's. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. At one point, we were playing with that as a title, but we're like, that won't go.
4 J's.
But yeah. So, and then you've got the writers. I mean, my gosh, like Norman and Chris.
But that list is enormous.
And then so it's, again, we wanted
the archetypes, those pillars, right, that we could sort of, this person represents this entire group of people.
Yeah. And then again, we put everybody in the credits that we could.
That we could.
No, that's great. You've kind of touched on this, especially you mentioned, that the original cut was over 2 hours long and things like that. We know that the sort of one of the downfalls of documentary filmmaking is that you have to kill your darlings. And didn't know if you had any examples of things where, like, we wanted the whole Kermit Love section, but it just had to go, or like, if there was a version of that in making Street Gang.
Well, I know, I'll say one thing beforehand, which I think is just an interesting point to clarify for people that are curious about making documentaries. A lot of people have asked us, well, why wasn't this person included, or why didn't you include that person, and because this is primarily an archival documentary, and that really helped to support the interviews. If there's no archival of that person, then you you can't include them because there's not enough story to build meat there. Where, to your point, where it really gets hard is when you have the meat and then you have to trim it down for time or whatever. And I know yours is Evelyn Davis.
Oh yeah.
That
I mean,
she's amazing.
You know, and again, for when you see the film, I could have just, Evelyn Payne Davis was the, vice president at the workshop, and she was brought in to do community outreach and organizing to ensure that communities of color, children in communities of color that they were trying to reach were actually reached by the show. And so she was in charge of the outreach vans that would go out, the media trucks, and showing
handing out televisions and antennas.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, thank you. Yeah.
It's
figuring out how to adjust your rabbit ears because no one knew what UHF was.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy to think.
It's like the gap in technology today, right? It's like who has access to internet, like who has access to, to make sure they're rabbit ears. I mean, these are pamphlets that were made, right, to make sure that you knew how to.
With Oscar pulling on them, know, it's hilarious.
So I mean, that could have been a whole piece in and of itself, just from the.
That's its own movie.
It is.
Yes,
it really is.
It really is.
And there was a whole nother section that we had to cut, which was really interesting about Jim Henson's live action films.
Oh yeah.
That he did a lot of with John Stone. I wish we could have added more connective tissue between like John and Joe Raposo and Jim Henson with like Hey Cinderella, which was their first piece that they had all done together, or seeing more of like Youth 68, which was something that Jim and John had worked on together. And we had this just great sequence of all of these live action pieces like Timepiece and all these other ones that, because Jim really considered himself a filmmaker, and an experimental filmmaker on top of, an overall, sort of media entertainer.
And everything he did, you see in the work that he did for the show.
Oh, yeah.
It's like taking these adult concepts and then doing it for a children's show. So we thought that was like a really great sort of, example to the audience of
I would have loved to have seen a lot more of
or
that.
a pull through of that.
Yeah.
But,
that was good.
107 minutes.
Yeah. There's only so much you can add in. Although we are putting we are putting extras in on the DVD.
Yes.
So there are like a bunch of awesome new scenes that have not yet been.
And on some of the on demand, right?
Yeah, on demand too. We're going to have them on like there's iTunes extras and there's extra scenes on both. So
excellent. No, that's something I was going to say though, is that it struck me somehow seeing in the way you guys presented it versus in other times in knowing about Jim's history, is that Sesame is so known for their parody, and in a way them getting Jim Henson was him almost doing a parody of himself, right? Because he was already known for these crazy commercials that were wacky to get sell coffee or chow mein or whatever, and now like sell the alphabet, and it was like the things that are doing the parodies are in self a parody of themselves.
Totally.
But what a brilliant addition, right? Because that was what also drew him in. This whole idea that Joan wanted to use these Madison Avenue techniques, and he was doing that, right?
Yeah.
And now, like Brian Henson says in the film, it was never his intention to do a children's show, but he had this incredible ability to make these concepts resonate commercially, right? So now he's like, can I turn it around and do it for this nonprofit organization to help teach children? And he was like, I'm all in. So it's incredibly interesting, and thank goodness, right? I mean, it's
and he's all in, but at the same time never lost what Jim and Frank always did. Yep. There's no like, they don't skip a beat, because, and I think that's also part of it, that here's the ad man who has perfected this perfect, hilarious style to basically fix the problem that has been created by ads. And on top of that, you're bringing parents in, which was intentional, so that you could have a co-viewing experience where the comedy worked at both levels.
And that's what the educators wanted.
And
so it's like layering this in.
And
right?
I don't think anybody else could have done that as effectively as Jim and Frank. I mean, I still think that the Grover salesman sketches with Kermit are probably some of the funniest things that have ever been on television. I mean, even like the little banter that happens ahead of time where like Kermit's on the phone when the door is knocked on and he's like, no, Bernie, we don't want to play Vegas. It's like these like little things that you don't even get, but the parents are getting them, and the layers that are happening with that level of improv that Jim and Frank did, and that was one of the things I think I was really happy to be able to show a little of the behind the scenes of Jim and Frank interplaying.
Yeah,
that's the
was
stuff
really
that
special.
like is pretty.
Yeah,
you can never have too much of that,
fantastic.
without a
Right.
doubt. Yeah,
Right.
it's always a treat.
No.
You know, you guys might have insight into this. It's something that I've kind of thought a lot about because, you know, they spent 4 years creating the show in the first place, right? I think the dinner party was in 65 or 66, and then they had 3 years of prep creating CTW and all this sort of thing. And it's easy to think about Sesame Street, as you said, as being like oxygen that's always existed. But you also hear, you know, Jim joke about like, I didn't think it was going to last more than a season or two. That's part of why I did it. What do you think the workshop's legacy might have been, or could have still been, if the experiment had failed or fizzled out by 71 or 72? Do you guys have any insights into that?
That's a great question.
And going through the archival stuff.
No one has never ever asked us that before. That's a great question.
Nobody wants to think about it, Cameron.
I know.
Why are you bringing this up? This is nightmares.
I'm the last person to want to think of a world where Sesame Street doesn't exist. Yeah.
Where Sesame Street didn't exist.
You know, but here's the thing. We're never going to know because you know why?
Yeah.
Because immediately there were co-productions happening
Right.
in Mexico and Germany. I mean, it was like, you know, this was such
You're so true.
of the moment in time that it seized what people were looking for. And Joan says it, you know, we have her, you know, saying, you know, an interview where she says it in the film. And it was, so I think how incredibly fortunate, obviously, we are that it didn't just go out in 71, but how, again, I think the thing about it is, how do you make something like that happen again? You never know, right? It just the fact that, but I think if you look at, and again, this is what we want people to take from the film, it's like they went for it, you know, and it wasn't a fly by night. They spent a lot of time perfecting it and making sure that, again, that it was right for the audience that they were trying to serve, all children, and specifically children in inner cities. And, you know, there's this great scene in the film where we show, you know, Sharon Lerner talking about the distractor that they would use. So
I love that.
If a kid wasn't paying attention, they would use the distractor to see like what wasn't resonating. So, and again, you know, you think about these deep research and methods, right, that they were doing to ensure the content was going to happen. And then there was this huge media buildup. I mean, promotional buildup.
They spent $1 million out of their $8 million budget just on promotion and marketing, and no one had ever done that before. And I think that's the weird thing to think about. It's like you know, I often say, like, you sort of layer in any one of these statements that you're going to make, and then you add on a kids show after the fact. It's like the first interracial cast on television that all lived on the same street on a kids show. Like the most biting and, you know, some wonderful comedy,
satirical humor
on satirical humor, thank you, on a kids show, or spending $1 million in 1969 on advertising for a kids show. It just never had happened. And
or to have like $8 million come from the government
also had never happened. Yeah. And I think even if it had failed, which obviously it didn't, but if it had failed, I think people still would have seen, it would have taken more time, but I think that those sort of core tenets that Sesame put out would have eventually found another, you know, person to bring them across. You know, somebody else in the, you know, in the chain would have picked it up.
It wouldn't have been
again.
Edison, but it'd be Tesla.
Yeah, correct. Exactly. There you go. Exactly right. Exactly right.
Fair enough. No, that's great. And I think, you know, to your point, not only are there the co-productions, but the show itself domestically continues to kind of change and regenerate, right? Like the show that's on right now, you know, it's the same show, but it's also not the same show that premiered 50 years ago. And that's another beautiful part about what they set up, that it's able to continue to ebb and flow with society.
And sometimes too, it just makes me think of like shows like even if it was a success, which it was, sometimes like being a success isn't enough. Like it has to be a great success, like financially. Like, oh, this show made money, but maybe we'll make more money with this. So like there's a lot of other reasons without it like failing catastrophically that it could have just kind of been a dead end. Like, hey, you know what? Everyone already bought all the Big Bird toys. Now let's make a new show so we can sell new things, which I know was never their goal.
Be a purple dinosaur.
Oh, God. But I know that wasn't their goal, but it's just great that those things could never get in the way. And again, probably because it was from that educational foundation in the beginning.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. And again, I think it was always mission driven. It continues to be mission driven. And this is the other part that people forget. It's a nonprofit organization. They continue. One of the things, they got this incredible bump in the beginning, but from the moment they came onto the scene and were successful, that began an incredible amount of fundraising that continues to need to happen in order for the show to happen. So again, these are the things in our society we can't take for granted. Like we all have to contribute in order to have the world that we want to have, right? And that means that we have to support the things that we know have value. And that's whatever those things are to ourselves, we need to continue to do that because they don't sustain if we don't all agree that we need to support them because they do have value, So I think that's a really important point.
No, that's excellent. To talk about something completely different from that really beautiful point you just made, Ellen. Wanted to talk about the swearing Muppets that you have in this piece.
I love this transition, Cameron.
Let's go. I'm ready.
I was so pleasantly surprised because Adam and I tell this to so many people, especially you're a school teacher. You tell this to your kids all the time of like, the show is created by adults, like, and it needs to be enjoyed by children and their parents and stuff. But like at the end of the day, it's a bunch of adults in a room trying to make a thing. And like, there's going to be pressure and that boils to the top. And it was so refreshing that you showed those like real moments and putting them on screen. So first, I just want to thank you for showing that to the public.
It was the first thing he said when he called me.
Yeah,
it was the first thing he said when he called me. Yeah, and on top of that too, was there any pressure on you to take that out potentially, or because I imagine there was a reason why they never really put that in any of the past ones.
Well, I mean, I'll just say I think you said it. It's an adult documentary. It can be enjoyed by families, but it's not really designed for 3-year-olds.
Right.
And it is, we wanted to show the people, and the people are, to your point, they're adults.
They're humans.
They're humans, and it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And that's so much fun. And these people were having the time of their lives, and they worked like crazy dogs every day. They made 130 hour-long episodes a season. It's banana. The budget for that today would be like unreal. $700 million a season. It's like not possible. But the fact that they just had so much fun with each other, that was such an important part of the documentary for us, because we didn't want to just show you what it was like to be on the set. We wanted you to feel what it was like to be on the set. And if we were able to capture that in just one tiny little iota, then I think we did our jobs.
I'm still a little surprised by it though, because like again, like some of the other documentaries that they've done have had some adult themes. Like specifically, I'm thinking of I Am Big Bird. There was some language in there and stuff throughout it, but still having their characters say it, and again, no doubt that it's happened on set, and that's what you're trying to capture. But still, I was just a little. I'm glad, because here's the thing. Here's the thing.
And nothing is lewd. Like we're not.
Oh yeah, just to of course, just to
we are PG rating.
It's a PG rating.
Not trying to
like.
It's coming out the wrong way. Yeah, but no, it's just it was just I kind of lost where I was going now.
I'm sorry.
It's sorry. Okay. No, it needed to be said what you said though. But I guess
well,
just
again,
like, well, here's the thing. We, like you just said, we all know that it's adults working on it, and people just make casual little jokes. Like you said, nothing was crude about it, but we never really seen it come out of the character's mouth before. But what I thought was kind of smart about it too, the fact that this footage does exist, like that's where it should be released, on a documentary rather than a hidden tweet by someone then goes viral for the wrong reasons, right? It's like put everything out in front of you, and then that just show that level of professionalism, of just like owning the history, all the even the little bit slightly inappropriate parts.
Well, again, I think this is where we were really, we are grateful that we were allowed to do this. And again, because it is an adult documentary. I mean, to Trevor's point,
and we're an independent documentary.
We're an independent documentary, but obviously, we all know that this is footage that we are being allowed to use. And, and that is because this story is about these moments that we're all talking about now. I'm sure all your viewers are like, I can't wait to see this. Yes, you can't wait to see it. No, but
it's out Friday, people.
It's about
yeah.
Link down in the description.
Yeah, May 7th. It's there.
But the important part about it was what we've heard from our cast that we interviewed. Is that what we wanted to capture was that feeling of when you have been done this skit like 1,000 times and you can't get it right. And your director is going to be angry because you got a New York crew and everybody's paying overtime and you're frustrated.
You don't want Frankie to be upset.
Yeah, Frankie,
Frankie Biondo, the cameraman.
Yes. He's like, and you've got John Stone, who's like, running, who's like big, energy, and also like, just the, running the scene. And that's what these moments are. And again, it's because we wanted to show the process and the experience of what it was like to be on set. So because it is representative of that, I think is why it was important for us to be able to put those moments in, because again, we want to tie it back to these are real people. These are real people and they're fun, but it's also, you've worked for a 14-hour day also, like the kids and like the grown-up children in the film say, it's like they didn't come home. They didn't come home. They worked and it wasn't something that maybe many of us would think would be reasonable today. Although I know a lot of people are working crazy hours, but that was what it was, because these people, because these people were united by a common understanding that they were doing something that was greater than themselves.
Yeah.
And so that was why they were willing to do whatever it took to get the show up. Yeah. And so that was the spirit and the energy that we wanted to capture. It's like that. We got to get it done. We got to get this show up. And in those moments, there are real human experiences that you have. And we all can experience them, whether we're puppeteers on a set or, in our office or just even with our kids.
And we did.
Although we don't tend to curse with our kids. Or then maybe we do. I don't know.
Well, we started recently.
She's fine.
She's fine. She's fine. But we did add in, there is an extra scene of bloopers.
Oh, in the extras,
in the extras on VOD and on the DVD too. So
excellent.
I won't tell you which ones, but they're good.
That's great. No, it's funny. So actually, the day that we're recording this, 10 years ago on today, my Facebook reminded me that I've actually visited Sesame Street for the first time, and I was kind of scrolling through pictures and to talk about like capturing the feeling of like actually being there. Because I got pictures with Carol and Oscar and Marty Robinson Matelli, and both of them for some reason decided to just strangle me. Like it was playful, of course, but like a quick
Makes
little
sense.
like
Totally normal.
And it's like, but it's that like letting the steam out and just having some fun.
It was fulfilling all of his fantasies that he always had.
Oh man, I went in the trash can
Marty's
myself.
fantasy.
It was the greatest.
He did. And I will say the other part that we got lucky about to be able to show this behind the scenes is that we had this amazing behind the scenes footage that was shot by Victor DiNapoli, who was an art director at the time, and he in the 80s
part of the crew.
he was part of the crew, and he was there. He got permission from the workshop to do a documentary about their day to day, and then it never happened. And because as a nonprofit, they kept putting the value on doing things that were mission based for kids, not so much in showing their work or their process. So lucky for us, we were able to get access to this incredible like 16 hours of footage that we were able to intercut in the film that is just these amazing people practicing, rehearsing, being on set. And and these interviews with Jim and with John and Joan, because they're so natural, because they're talking to somebody who is their like essentially their Sesame family, and that they trust so implicitly. So everybody is just doing their thing. And we were so fortunate to be able to get access to that footage and to be able to put it in, much of which has never been seen by audiences before. So we're really fortunate.
Yeah.
Is that this footage that also like you see the Honker Ducky Dinger Jamboree and Bert and Ernie building the snowman, and okay, wonderful.
Yep. All of that is all part of this DiNapoli footage, as we have coined it.
Yeah.
You know, the first couple of sequences of the film are with Fat Blue and Grover doing the waiter bit, and Frank flubs a line, and it's all of that is essentially all this 16 millimeter footage that we have, which, again, most of it hasn't been seen anywhere.
They used a little bit of it, like in the 40th anniversary, I think.
Just a touch. There,
Yeah,
I think,
they
like
used...
the old school DVDs. There was like a couple, like 3 or 4 minutes of it. But you know, it's funny because when we got the actual reels from the workshop, you know, they come on the big, you know, like discs, and we got the log, and we're checking everything off, and all of a sudden we realize there's a whole nother reel that hasn't actually isn't on the log. We've got more cans than we have like notes on the log. We're like,
I just saw Adam's face.
yeah, you know, it's like, is
Adam's
it the
like,
JFK
really?
mysteries? Is it Area 51, or is it something even better? Muppet outtakes. You know, it's like you don't know what it is. It's like this magical moment when you're a filmmaker and you find this like treasure, literally like a box full of treasure. And it's just so interesting and so cool to be able to see that. And just being in the archives at the workshop in general is just like, you know, you're just swimming through tapes and sea of awesome
And that's also the hard part
stuff.
too, right? Because I mean, again, we keep saying this embarrassment of riches, but we had our amazing film gang. So like our director Marilyn Agrello, our producer who was in New York, Lisa Diamond, you know, our editor Ben Gold. Oh my gosh, Ben. With the cutting of the how's this thing going to come together, and you know, we have our amazing composer Todd Griffin, our archival producer Rich Remsburg that we spoke about. I mean, it was you know, it's
we had a gang of our own. You know, it's kind of funny how like you sort of things get mimicked sometimes in a project that you're working on, and we had our own little
Gil Choi, our assistant editor. Oh my gosh, Gil, the workhorse.
No, it's just funny because you sort of you're seeing these parallels in your own team, and you're seeing how this process of creativity works. It's very like meta, you know, it is kind of like seeing these multiple sort of rings as you're building something about creativity, and you're watching your own creative process unfold, and you can't help but to be informed by your subject, to learn and to build something that, you know, has some of that same intentionality to it.
But you want to talk about, like, you know, the darlings, like, you know, everybody, then you have a whole team that's got their own darlings, right? So they're like,
why can't we have this one sketch of this one Muppet that I love? And it's like, because
it doesn't actually fit.
It doesn't work, but I love that one too. And
no one's ever heard of Herbert Birdsfoot before. We don't need him.
That's right. Nobody liked Harvey Knee Slapper, okay? You're not having him in the film.
Love it. What was I going to say?
Did I offend you guys? Do you love Harvey Knee Slapper? Is that like
I don't think Adam knows who that is.
The room got
This
quiet for a
interview
second.
is over. I have no idea who it is.
Oh, it's going so well.
Scratch ending. Dang it! I knew I shouldn't have talked so much.
No. I would sort of like to selfishly ask about this, just because we're so close now with Deb Spinney, having had her on the show, and it was just so wonderful to see Carol with Oscar again and in his art studio and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about just getting that footage and what it was like to, because I'm sure talk about embarrassment of riches and film on the floor, like there must be so much of that you know, you guys had to not include in the movie.
If I can just say, you know, obviously I think we might be the most comprehensive interview that Carol did, you know, at the end. I think we might be one of the last comprehensive interviews he did. We know he did some other things, and we are incredibly fortunate that we had that. And I have been in contact with Deb, you know.
You've talked to Deb a bunch recently.
Yeah, and I just to keep her up to date, and she's been so incredibly supportive. And, you know, we have this wonderful picture that you guys have seen, you know, with Carol and Oscar that we took at his house, and that was selected to be the lead photo for Sundance. And, you know, I had shared it with Deb, and she was so happy, you know, that photo of Carol and Oscar was sort of the, you know, it was our branding for the film, because we didn't have any other marketing materials when we did Sundance, and we were too. It was just, you know, so it is incredibly special, you know, and he was an amazing human, and they our amazing couple, you know. So just to be around that energy and to get to talk to them was such a privilege.
And there was like a snowstorm during that shoot. Like it almost didn't happen.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know why, but every time we filmed anybody, because this filmed over a period of years, it was always in December.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but we were always filming in like...
Poor producing, maybe. I don't know.
I think it was either November, December, January, or February. It was almost always what it was. Didn't matter when it was in LA. That was easy because it's always sunny in LA. But you know, but there was a huge snowstorm, and you know, Carol's home and Carol and Deb's home is like a Swiss chalet. You know, and it looks like another world. Like you've literally like flown to another country when you get to this part of Connecticut. And having Carol in his natural environment and seeing just how much he fits, he and Deb just fit in that home. And, you know, having Oscar there, you know, I think that was one of the fun things in the film was that Carol did an interview in the Dinah Shore show, and you know, he talked about the different parts of his personality, and just seeing that little bit of Oscar come out, and it was all Oscar during that interview, you know, and there's a little bit of it in our film, but it's like it just shows you just how much a puppeteer is connected to their character and how much that character is connected to the puppeteer, because as I'm sure so many of your guests have said, you know, I believe it, having seen it, you don't know what you're going to say as the character, you know, it just comes out. But it was so Oscar what he said, and just the sort of attitude that he had with the crew and everything was just, it was awesome. It was like just such an incredibly special moment. And to see him doing his artwork, I was so glad that we were able to capture that, because I don't know how much longer, you know, that was able to happen. So it was great that we had it. Yeah.
No, it was really special. It was a nice treat to be able to see.
You know, talking about some of this just makes me think about, like, when you're interviewing somebody, especially like you said, it was between years, and you're trying to tell this story with, you know, interviews that are years apart, which it has to be difficult by itself. But again, it probably helps having like the book as a guide. Have you ever like had maybe you were interviewing someone and expecting a certain story, you know, for your narrative, and then maybe not getting what you need, or like, why don't you tell that story about this? I can imagine that, you know, you want it to be as natural as an interview as you can be, but then again, you know, I know some
you said it for Michael Davis. Can you say it for us? Because we need it.
Yes, exactly. We need it on film.
On page 46 of your last interview, you said these words.
You know, it's Marilyn has a really great style when she's interviewing her, you know, her subjects, and it's very zen, it's very calm, and she has a really great way of drawing people out and getting information, and I think that you see that in the film, you know, for sure. But, you know, because we did do this over multiple years, you know, there were things we kept looking through transcripts and saying, did they say this? This would be great if they said this.
Yeah, they didn't say it.
They didn't say it. So,
man.
like, you know, there were those kinds of moments. And again, because it's so critically important that we're being truthful and we're being representative of people's experience. You know, believe me, there's people out there that would put words in people's mouths. We were never going to do that, you know? So it was, then you have to try to find archival, or you've got to, you know, see if there's, you know, and then you know, there's sometimes that people don't say the story that you want them to say, but that's okay. 'Cause sometimes people don't want to tell a certain story over again, or there's some people we interviewed that did not end up in the film, you know? So, and that mostly was due to time and story, but you know, it's definitely a difficult process, and it's especially a difficult process for a documentary that is trying to be very truthful to what the experience was and to who these individuals were. And we felt again, like I still must say this a lot, but I have a lot of gratitude, because this was a very difficult process. in everybody just believing that it was all going to come together, you know. But when we had our screening, you know, at Sundance, we got to talk to a lot of our cast, and you know, whatever the reviews were that were going to come out of Sundance, you know, you have no control over that. But the feedback that we got from them about how we were able to capture that moment was everything. You know, they were really that they were happy with what we did and that we did it correctly. That was the review we needed. Yeah. And all the rest of it was gravy. We really felt like that was and as documentarians, that was really one of our ultimate goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kind of main thing I'm wondering is just, you know, like, now that you've done this, and of course you're going to be riding this wave and trying to make it as successful and widespread as you can, what is next for you guys? Is there going to be more puppet stuff in the future? Is this actually chapter 1 of Street Gang, the series? Who knows, depending on how well it does? Or are you like, I'm done with puppets?
They still have to get the book out.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, the book's
of course,
coming.
the book. Yeah.
Yeah.
The
So
book's coming.
we have the VOD, then we have on demand, then we have the Blu-ray and the DVD comes out. Then at the end of the year,
July.
in July that comes out. And then at the end of the year, we have the unseen photos of Street Gang, how we got to Sesame Street, published by Abrams. And then we are starting to ramp up on another project, which may include also puppets that has nothing to do with Sesame Street.
I like
Interesting.
a little cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Fine.
Stay tuned.
I was like, what's next? Like a documentary on the origin of Jello or something? Like, it could really go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Well,
You don't know.
here's the
I
other thing
just guessed
too.
it probably too,
In addition to documentary, you know, we've published a children's graphic novel called The Not So Secret Society. You know, we have an adult comic book series called Lantern City that we did. You know, we've also done narrative film. You know, Trevor was a producer on this film, The Experimenter. So that's the cool part about our company, and again, that we're small and agile, is that we've been able to pursue these projects that are very that we have a lot of passion for. Yeah. You know, and
they're all focused on world building. I mean, that's kind of what, you know, our company is called Macrocosm, and it's, you know, the sort of the big universe, the interconnected worlds, and that's really what drives us is, you know, inspiring people with worlds that we've built through our original IP, or also, you know, showcasing worlds that have been built like Sesame Street. I mean, that's, you know, and finding these really immersive ways to tell the story. And that's not always done, especially with documentary, to, you know, you put out a documentary and that's it. But for us, you know, there's a lot of additional content actually in the book, in the unseen photos of Street Gang, where we pulled additional parts of the transcripts out, where we layered in other stories that we couldn't tell because we ran out of time. And we showcased these amazing David Addy photos of, again, all behind the scenes photos. I mean, these things are absolute gems. There are a lot of different ways to tell the story, and we want to make sure that everybody can access the medium in however they want to get into it the most. So it's always going to be sort of multi-layered for us.
So we hope the film does well, so we can keep doing it.
Yeah. I think it will.
Certainly can't wait to see what comes next. But before we start to wrap up, was there anything else that you guys wanted to say about the movie or the experience you had making it that you weren't able to say based on the questions that Adam and I asked you?
I will just tell one other little fun anecdote
that
I think some of your viewers will like. So we interviewed Fran Brill at a hotel called the Paper Factory, which is in Queens, and it's pretty close to Kaufman Studios, where they film Sesame Street. It's also very close to the Jim Henson Creature Shop, because they're all like in like a triangle radius walking distance from each other. And I remember before we filmed Fran, it was my job, because I would not allow anyone else to do it, to go get Prairie Dawn. So I remember like walking to go to the creature shop to pick up Prairie Dawn, and then I was like carrying the football basically, and I was expecting like essentially like a hermetically sealed case that had like a digital code on the side that basically would then need my thumbprint and like a retina scan. It was a duffel bag with her inside it, like wrapped up in plastic, because she's a puppet. And, you know, it was just a fun moment. So there I am, like walking down the streets of Queens, which is a lovely neighborhood, actually, and totally beautiful sunny day. Like, but in my mind,
no pun intended.
That's right, sunny day. But in my mind, I've created this like incredible espionage track that I'm, you know, like, this is like a bag of who knows what, and I'm,
Gold or
you know, I
something.
have to get it to the paper factory by a certain time, and it was all fun, and it was a lot of fun, and Fran was amazing, and we saw her working with Prairie Dawn, and she did a whole bit, which was super funny, and Fran is just fantastic, and I know you guys know because you had her on the show, but
yeah, and we have to and to say that we have to thank the Henson Company too, the Jim Henson Company, because they gave us access, and you know, so we were able to get access to the archivals and talk to the amazing Karen Falk, who's the archivist there, and so that was just again incredibly
and the whole Henson family and everybody. It's just, it's
incredibly supportive of the helping us tell the story that we wanted to tell with the film and get access to Muppets. So that was
pretty
great.
cool. It was a lot of fun.
I love that. That's such a great story. Well, as we wrap up, we'd love to know if you guys had any good puppeteer stories. We ask all our guests who come on if there was a moment in making the film where you wanted to like be pulling your hair out, that things were going wrong. You almost dropped the football, for instance. But now looking back, we could kind of laugh about it and shed a good puppeteer.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it was like an almost 6-year process making this film. So I think there were a lot of
Talking about real tears or
tears.
puppet tears, because there's, I mean, you know, oddly, like I'll say this is actually a real tear moment, but in a very happy way. I remember when we were filming Nick Raposo, and he was talking about just about being a kid on Sesame Street, where you were literally having Frank Oz play with you as Grover. And he got very emotional about it, and I just like lost it. I mean, it was just because it was so real, and it was so much, I think, what we all wanted as kids. You know, we wanted to be able to, you know, to have Grover really as our friend. And here we are interviewing people that really were friends with Grover. You know, Polly Stone has a great bit where she was on the show. I mean, she's, you know, she's in our movie in as a child with Grover, and you know, we interview her as well, and it's very wonderfully emotionally sort of like washes over you to really see the authenticity of how much love there was. And it really got me that day. Like, it really got me. It was so much fun. It was so great. That was also the same day we interviewed Emilio Delgado, and he was awesome too. So it was just like, you know, you're just meeting so many fantastic people that you fell in love with.
When you feel that 6 degrees of separation go down to 1 degree of separation is always like, it just makes your heart soar.
Essentially 0 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's like I say in the book, the wizards behind the curtain, you know, they're really just as magical as what's in front of the curtain. And you worry about that sometimes because you're like, oh, is this really going to be as good as you think it is in your mind? But they really are that great.
With them,
it is really much that fun.
Yeah. And I think puppeteers for me, I think I could probably share this moment with most everybody who's listening, is that when, you know, it was really when COVID hit, you know, and I remember, you know, Michael Davis was out here in LA, and we had just, you know, we had some meetings and things were going really great. And it was just when things were happening, you know, at the beginning of 2020. And we had wrapped our office in New York. We had a production office in New York. We were getting ready to go into post-production. And we had a lot of things, a lot of good check marks happening for the film. And then, like for so many, COVID hit. And we basically
everything died.
Everything, I mean, it just really came to a screeching halt. And we weren't really sure what was going to happen, you know, with this movie. Like, was it going to get finished? Were we going to be able to, you know...
Sundance wasn't happening at that point in time. Like, nothing was occurring. So
so it was, you know, and again, I think, you know, you just have to have this ability. I give Trevor a lot of credit for this, just this ability to constantly say, okay, well, it doesn't look great today, but we're going to get up and we're going to keep pushing forward, and we're going to see what tomorrow brings. And you really,
my stoic nature.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think it's just, again, when you're an independent company, or if you're somebody that's committed to an idea, again, that you know is good, and you're really trying to just say, okay, how do I keep moving forward? And that was really our, that experience, because we really had real tears of like, I don't know, like we've put so much into this. Is it going to happen? And we're obviously here today talking with you lovely people because it's happening. It's happened. And that was great. But we didn't know that was going to be the case. So
yeah,
we're glad to be here.
Yeah, we're really glad it did too. And so what's also the best way for people to follow the happenings of this show and find more viewings? What's the best way to find it?
You can go to streetgangmovie.com, and that'll get you essentially access to all the information that you need. All the film is getting put out by our theatrical distributor, Screen Media, and you can also go to Street Gang Doc. That'll also give you some additional information about show times and things like that. They're on both sides there, and
or you can follow us on all social media at the handle @StreetGangMovie. Yep. So we're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at @StreetGangMovie.
Wonderful,
excellent. Well, Trevor Crafts and Ellen Scherer Crafts, thank you so much for joining us on Puppeteers.
Oh,
it was
thrilled.
Great, and can't wait to see what you guys create next.
And everyone go see the movie.
Yes.
Please.
Go buy it on
Friday.
Friday.
So much
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
so
you,
much.
guys.
Bye.
We're at the end of another episode of Puppeteers, but the fun doesn't stop here.
Visit puppeteers.com for show notes and links to projects mentioned in this episode.
Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter @PuppeteersPod, where we're posting new things every day.
Puppeteers is edited by Matt Bowen and made possible thanks to viewers like you.
If you enjoy this content, you can join our incredible Patreon patrons who are supporting the show for as little as $1 per episode. Those folks get access to early releases, uncut episodes, official Cup O tiers just like we use on the show, and could even submit interview questions for our guests. Go to patreon.com/puppeteerspod to learn more.
Another great way to support Puppeteers is rating and reviewing us on iTunes, leaving a comment or subscribing to this channel, or tell a friend about your favorite episode.
Thanks again for joining us on Puppeteers Puppetry Shop Talk, in-depth interviews with the world's most passionate puppeteers.
Hosted by me, Adam Krutinger.
And me, Cameron Garrity.
Yeah. What is it about Street Gangs that made you want to make Street Gangs into the documentary rather than maybe just being inspired by Street Gangs and saying, let's just make a Sesame Street origin documentary? Because I imagine you wouldn't necessarily need Michael Davis's approval to do a Sesame Street documentary.
Didn't you hear they got Michael Douglas's approval as well?
Yes,
that would be amazing. They did, because
we wanted the Catherine Zeta-Jones cameo.
He's on the DVD
movie,
cover.
Michael.
so much for cutting that
Michael, if you're listening, my first movie was Romancing the Stone.
Yeah.
If you're listening, if you're out there, I was 4 years old.
Sorry, buddy.
No, that's all right.
No.
Let me just kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on. I'm sorry. Let me just kind of re-say it again. Oh, just for people. Well, it'll be interesting how much of this we keep.